You are tuning in to a special broadcast on Ready, Set, Real Estate, the show that supports real estate literacy, advocacy, terms, concepts, and careers. We have featured over 60 independent contractors on this show in the last year and a half, and we have concluded 2 seasons with dynamic speakers, presenters, amazing special millennial guests. And as we continue our season 3, we will not disappoint. I want to say thank you to my family and my friends for supporting the show, the movement, the literature, the nonprofit. And for those of you who are new to me, welcome. Welcome to this tribe. Shout out to Dre. This is my brother DeAndre. We go back, way back since middle school. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you share, repost, create a watch party. Let somebody know we're doing a special free webinar on Ready, Set, Real Estate. You see, this is why I say stay connected. You never know what I'm willing to give. I am willing to give to you. So I am so happy and excited about what is happening with the show. As I said, we're in season 3. View the archive if you haven't. We covered farming hemp on the last episode, which was the first opening episode of season 3. We covered farming hemp, the cannabis industry, and learning how to legally run a weed business. It is the green rush sweeping the nation. So I want to thank my guest, Tariq Bey and Mr. Gathers for joining us on that show. And today I've got something special. Shout out to the coach, DP3. That is my coach, my real estate coach, high performance coach, the top producers, real estate professionals, and really industry professionals. If you're a sales rep, you got to get connected with the coach, DP3 on IG. Make sure you stay connected. He hosts seminars, webinars, workshops, and conferences throughout the year. If you want to up your game, get connected with David Plummer III, who's also title rep at Stewart Title. Okay. Today, I wanted to do something different, which is actually give you a free webinar, a free how-to. Why? Because I'm noticing in the industry, we take for granted what we think people know or how to do. So no more taking for granted. And we'll start by saying, welcome to the free webinar as part of the Ready, Set, Real Estate webinar series. Do check the schedule. There is a monthly webinar happening every 3rd Saturday of the month. I think some powerful information where I will have the opportunity to do those webinars live. I will. If you'd like me to come out to your organization and present them live for your industry professionals, I will, and I'm happy to do that. Feel free to get connected. So I wanted to share just a bonus today, which was a webinar we had done at the start of the year, and it actually went hand in hand with my 5th publication, which is Just Fell Out of Escrow, Top 5 Reasons a Property Does Not Sell. And yes, this book is actually, you can pick up a copy direct if you're local. You get a signed copy if you're local, or if you're on, if you have accounts with Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and at over 70 online retailers, grab a copy. Just Fill Out of Escrow, Top 5 Reasons a Property Does Not Sell. I give some great gems away, and I think everything I offer is some real estate gems because a lot of my transactions have not been the easy transactions. So it has stretched me, challenged me, forced me to grow in ways that I am now grateful for, that I have now put my experience into webinar formats, into book formats, into real estate content and shows. So I do want to say shout out to our radio podcast listeners who are listening to this segment as a replay. So Facebook Live and Instagram Live. I'm actually testing the Instagram Live feature because I normally don't do Ready Set Real Estate live on Instagram, but today's the first time. So we're testing that out, which I'm really excited about. And so I want to, in honor of the book release, I want to give a free webinar that I actually offered. And it's called Just Fill Out of Escrow, How to Save the Deal. And let me just adjust my talk boxes is what I want to do. Great. All right. So I want to say that, so for most folks, when in escrow, let me just cover what is escrow actually, because depending on where you are in this world, in this part of the country, escrow is a third party that handles the transaction. Once you have accepted offer, they handle the exchange of documents and records and the financing or the money or the funding. So they are the middle person, if you will. They are to be a neutral third party that is assisting and managing that transaction with the team players, which is the listing agent and or buyer's agent, depending if there is two brokers involved. So yes, only one broker can be involved in the transaction, which means they're representing both sides of a deal, which is called dual agency, also known as double ending, right? So you're representing both listing, seller, or buyer as a selling agent. So we're all about terms and concepts. So I want to make sure you have the proper terms. The seller is represented by the listing agent, and the buyer is represented by the selling agent, also known as the buyer's agent. And so when you're in escrow, I wanted to point out that most folks will come to me or come to our team and say, hey, do you have an REO list? Do you have auctions list? Do you have short sales? Everyone's looking for real estate deals. And what inspired me to write this book is because most folks are missing opportunities for deals right in front of them. And those are the Just Fill Out of Escrow deals. Just because a property ends up under contract and is in escrow doesn't necessarily mean it will close. It's not closed, it's not sold until we have keys and commissions. We get keys and commissions up in here. So most people get excited, which you should. I still do. I still like the newness of getting an offer accepted, moving into the next phase, which is under contract, getting into escrow, and then executing the terms and conditions of that contract. So I wanted to share that according to Trulia, about 3.9% of sales fell out of escrow, and that was as of 2016. So 3.9%. That means you still have an opportunity to purchase that ideal home, that ideal buy, that ideal investment property. Why? Especially when you have influences like shifting markets and rising interest rates, or I should say fluctuating interest rates, that can at any point be these wild card variables that will impact a deal and make it go the other way around. So just a little bit about me, just to give you background. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, welcome. My name is Lisa Puerto. I am a licensed California real estate professional. Current brokerage is Team Equity LA, based in Inglewood. We are a boutique firm serving the community for over 30 years. I am known by my trademark, which is super agent. That is my federal registered trademark. I'm an international speaker, I should say international speaker, public educator, and as of date, I have 5 books published internationally. I'm an award-winning author and super agent with accolades and things that I've done in support of the community, the advocacy, and the literacy of real estate. And that work comes through the books that I've done, being a proponent of just helping those who are seeking to close that wealth gap and mend it with personal prosperity. I am also founder of Real Estate 100 Youth Foundation, which is this country's first real estate focused nonprofit organization, which focuses on real estate literacy, terms and concepts. And you will hear me intentionally say that word literacy, literacy, literacy. Why? Because in the work that I've done over the past couple of years, I have found that not everyone wants to do home ownership. So we have to be very careful about saying that we're proponents and advocates. And I think as a professional, for me, personally speaking, I'm careful when I'm using these multimedia transmission platforms to discuss real estate, that I'm very careful and sensitive that not everyone wants to do home ownership. Not everybody wants to own real estate. So what I'm a proponent of is real estate literacy. I'd rather you make those decisions on knowing versus not knowing. And that even comes with your rights as a renter. So landlord tenant laws, there's a whole thing around that. And that's another reason I was inspired to do this webinar, is because I see locally here in Inglewood, there has been this emergency moratorium on rent hikes. So when you see things happening like that, this is a cry for people saying, hey, we're in a serious housing crisis. We're being impacted by gentrification, development, et cetera, et cetera. And the people are crying out to say, how do we put a stop to it? How do we not snowball into increasing homelessness? So this is why, again, my position will always be an advocate of real estate literacy so that people can make informed, intelligent decisions. And so now I'm opening this up to everyone. So I'm not specifically saying this is only for agents, this is only for buyers, this is only for sellers. I want to share the benefits of learning how to save the deal, especially if you're in a real estate transaction or you're in the industry. And by the way, this book actually is dedicated to you, the industry professional, the seller, the buyer, the prospective seller, the potential buyer. This book I dedicated to you so that we can actually create an environment where we're operating in tandem, we're supporting one another, we're operating ethical, we're staying in those guidelines and fine lines of what is legally right to get the deal done, especially when we start to see market shifts and an industry that is quote unquote saturated with industry professionals and who don't know how to carry themselves through a shifting market. And people tend to be susceptible to committing fraud. So this is one of the reasons I wanted to come out and do this, is because I'd like to see it more. And you know the quote, be the change, become the change you want to see. And so that's what this is for me. Everything that I do is because this is what I want to see in my existence. And if it needs to start here with me, I'm so happy to do it. And as you can see, going to close to 200 episodes in, using all social media platforms to get the word and information out there, you can see that I walk that talk. So benefits to learning how to save the deal. So if you're a seller, the benefit is achieving the goal of selling within a specified time frame, right? So more than likely, sellers have a timeline of when they need to move. They've got things they want to do. They have, especially when there's large increments of money involved. So albeit that's an upgrade, that's a downsize, job relocation, there's a life event, there's an ailing parent, there's a death, a new marriage, divorce, new babies, growing family. And this is why, for me professionally, my business, I'm not concerned about market shifts, because I know my clientele that I cater to are those that are having life events that trigger real estate need, which are those examples that I just named just now. The benefits to a buyer in saving the deal: they don't waste money on inspections, reports, and appraisals. And I'm actually going to share with you some cost savings opportunities when you're looking in this specific pool of properties. And for agents, if you're an industry professional, you look like the star that got it done. Clearly, we don't jump into escrow with the intent of falling out of escrow, things falling apart or canceling and people losing their deposit or refunding deposits and having spent money. Like, that's not the intent for us to get into escrow. However, we sometimes experience that in our transactions. So this is why this is a space where I'd like to address some ways we can get through that. Okay. So let's talk about escrow and BOM. BOM as in back on market. So if you're taking notes or you're catching the replay, the acronym BOM stands for back on market, and I'll come back to that. So as I mentioned with escrow and settlement, so depending where you are in part of the country, they handle it with escrow services, third-party companies or title companies, or if you're mainly on the East Coast, you also know it as settlement. And settlement is the same thing. It's getting buyer and seller to assisting buyer and seller transact or complete that exchange between property record, property itself, and transferring it in exchange for money. And there are things that have to happen in between that. One of the things that I wanted to point out is knowing the difference between an independent escrow company versus a non-independent escrow company. Do know that in real estate, everything is negotiable, including the escrow services. Oftentimes we see that sellers, I wouldn't say sellers, but listing agents would like to, they would prefer negotiating their escrow companies, their title companies, their vendors, et cetera, et cetera. Do know if you have buyer's representation, such as a selling agent or a buyer's agent, that agent can negotiate those vendor services. I just don't give it up all willy-nilly. It's a negotiating point. So it allows me to get something in exchange for that. So if I say, yes, you can have the escrow, I may negotiate and say, I want our title company. If we say, yes, you get escrow, then we want you to pay X, Y, Z. So those things are important, is to learn that you have those negotiating opportunities with that line item. It's a specific line item on the contract. So make sure you're using that to your advantage. I can expand more on that outside of that. And again, I will share if you'd like for me to consult with you on your transaction, I'm happy to do that. Make sure you reach out. You can send an email directly at lisa@lasuperagent.com. There are tons of people that I've been consulting, assisting, referring to qualified agents to assist them with their transaction. And I'm happy to do that with you as well. So back on market, I brought this up because it's also what just fell out of escrow is known as. And you will see it actually if you type it in Zillow, Google, and you just type in just fell out of escrow, properties will come up. If you do BOM, back on market, properties will come up. And the reason why this is important, especially if you're a buyer and you're looking for those pool of opportunities and those cost savings opportunities, you may want to pay attention to those BOMs and the DOM. So the DOM stands for days on market. Why? The longer property sits on the market, the more incentive a seller has with negotiating your terms and conditions. So be mindful. Ideally, the ideal time to sell a property, which you'll get multiple offers depending on how it's strategically priced, is usually between the first 10 to 14 days. If you don't see a property move by then, what you can do is submit an offer that starts the conversation, is what we like to say. You got to start somewhere. So I know for those of you who are listening to me on the radio podcast, you can't see the visuals, but again, you can definitely subscribe to the YouTube where you'll actually see the video and the slideshow. So I'm actually doing a slideshow because this is a webinar that I'm doing as a free giveaway. Excuse me. So here's a snapshot actually, and I pulled this out of our MLS database, which is known as the multiple listing service. The multiple listing service. So this screenshot here is actually, hey, Haley Divine, this screenshot here is one that says back on market. And you'll see in the remarks, and I'm also on Facebook Live at my LA Super Agent page if you haven't subscribed there as well. Again, this is why I say stay connected, stay connected with the lives and the YouTubes and whatnot, because if you're visual and I'm doing a free webinar in this instance, you get to see the presentation and see how this is real properties, real descriptions that say BOM, back on market. And this one I have highlighted, the remark says back on market, buyer couldn't perform and reduced. What are they talking about when they say reduced? Talking about they reduced the price. They've reduced the price. Uh, my next slide, there's another example. Back on market, buyers were unable to perform. Their loss is your gain. I always laugh about agents, how they do property descriptions and these remarks. It fascinates me. So here's another example where in the property description, there's just fell out of escrow. And it says literally just fell out of escrow with about 4 exclamation points. And in the agent remarks, it says property just fell out of escrow. Seller is very motivated, looking at all offers. So again, these are the pool of opportunities that people are missing up. Why? Because no one's told you to look there, and you're parroting what people say with saying, I want a foreclosure list, I want to buy REOs, I want an auction property, I want to do short sale, probates. There's tons of opportunities in off-market listings that are available that you can purchase from and find the deals. And I would say the deals that are actually the great deals are the ones where everyone wins. Seller, buyer, agents, the universe. Win, win, win is something we want to advocate for. So another example, this is beautiful in Rancho Mirage, California, beautiful pool home. It says back on market, just fell out of escrow. So this is an example where actually they use both terms. And this is, I use that screenshot and those examples because I want you to see that these really do exist. These are opportunities. So if you're a buyer, so listen up, take notes. This is a gem right here. How do you use inspections for cost savings? You can use those inspections for cost savings if you're a buyer. Why? So typically in a transaction where property is fallen out of escrows, back on market, oftentimes it has to do with what has been disclosed or revealed about that property. So meaning a home inspection was completed, and I'm just going to do a valuation on single family to 4 units that can run you as a buyer, because these are your out-of-pocket costs. That can be anywhere from $300, $350 to $1,500, depending if you're buying 4 units or multi-units, multi-single family. So there's a value right there. What can you do with a property that's already fallen out of escrow? Your agent, if you have representation, you can ask for a copy of the home inspection report if they have it on file. Usually they will have it on file. Why? Because the previous buyer who was in escrow used that report to negotiate repairs. They wanted things fixed, they wanted things addressed, and sometimes it may be too much for the seller to do at that specific time. They may not want to do it, and they may be disclosing that the property is being sold as is. So here you have an opportunity to jump in a transaction that has fallen apart. You've come in, or not even, you don't even have to even actually get into the acceptance or in escrow. You can reach out to the agent, which I've done, and I say, if you have the home inspection report on file, would you please email it to me so that I can review it with my client, my buyer client, my investor client, so that we can take a look at what was already done. And if it's a reasonable, good home inspection, you may not want to spend the additional funds to do another inspection report. But again, this is your due diligence, and all of this as a buyer is part of your due diligence. So right there, you saved anywhere from $300 to $1,500. Boom, savings. The other opportunity you have in cost savings when purchasing, and this is albeit you are doing it for the first time or you're going to do it next time, there's the appraisal. So appraisal is an out-of-pocket cost to you, buyer, to you, investor. So there's your down payment, and let me just say, as a buyer, let me itemize what your out-of-pocket cost will be. Your credit report, when they run it, some lenders will charge you for that anywhere from, I would say, $20 to $40. More than that is crazy. Have your lender eat that cost. No, they're gonna be mad at me. But some of them actually do pay for it if you do the loan with them, right? So those are the questions you should ask. So your out-of-pocket is your credit report when they run your credit to prepare for your pre-approval and your TBD approval. The other thing is your down payment and your closing costs. Do know, per the contract, your closing costs is not a contingency of the transaction. So what does that mean? If you don't have enough money to bring to the table and you have an accepted offer, you risk losing your deposit. So it's very, very important that you cushion some savings for the closing costs. One of the examples I use for closing costs, hey, Wolf of Broad Street, glad you're chiming in. One of the examples that I use for closing costs with the youth, I say, hey, when you go to the store and you buy a bag of chips, or you go to the store and you buy games, shoes, clothing, I ask them to give me an example of how much those things will cost. And they say, oh, $199, $200, $400, $500. And I love the youth because they know how much those items cost. So I relate this example to that. I say, do you go to the store with exactly $299, $300? They say no. I say, why not? They said, because of the taxes. Absolutely. Taxes is included as part of closing costs in your real estate transaction, along with other fees like the escrow fees, the title fees, and there's some miscellaneous fees in there. You have city, county transfer taxes. You have private fees. So there's a list of fees in there. And when you open your transaction, you are due to have that fully disclosed to you as a buyer within 3 days of that submitting. So I wanted to share and address closing costs out of pocket, because again, as I was covering, as a buyer, you're going to have your credit report, you're going to have your down payment, you're going to have your closing costs. That's bundled, right? Some people may ask me, well, Lisa, how much would you consider I save, or what should I factor? Because there are various programs available, we'd like to say anywhere from 3 to 6%, depending on what program. You can actually purchase using 1% using city and down payment programs. So check with your professional, check with your lender, because not all lenders participate in those programs. They have to attend trainings and courses every 6 months so that they can offer those city funded programs. And that's the difference. So if one bank or lender tells you, no, we can't assist you, we don't have that program, that doesn't mean no, that you can't do it. It just means no, they won't do it. Okay, there's a difference. So now there's also the appraised value that I mentioned. The cost of the appraisal will run you anywhere from $500 to $800, depending on what type of loan you are using. That's VA loan, FHA loan, or conventional loan. And I'll come back and revisit loan types with you. I just wanted to just give you so you can hear some of the numbers of what's involved. And so with that, oh, let me come on here and shout out Real Game. Yes, Troy says Real Game. I'm giving up some Real Game. Thank you. I'm toggling between two windows, really 3 screens right now. So I have my PowerPoint, I have Facebook Live, and I have Instagram Live open. So thank you, Troy, for chiming in. So with that being said, there are the appraised values. Now, the other thing you need to consider in terms of out-of-pocket costs is specialty inspections. Specialty inspections are any inspections you do above your general home inspection. So you want to get a specialized inspection for plumbing. You want somebody to run a camera through the plumbing, through the pipes. Make sure everything checks out. We've done specialty inspections before. They are expensive. The client ends up paying that. Is it worth it? Yes, because then you find out there's a tree that's busting through your pipeline, which is causing a backup and the water flow to slow down and all kinds of things. So you have weird things happening in your sink. You definitely want to get a plumber to come out and check that out. Okay. And who else? Specialty inspections. A roofer. Again, your general home inspector is a general home inspector. That's what it is. And he will defer you to the specialty inspectors, getting a roofer to come out here and tell you what's the lifeline left remaining on the roof. How much years do you have left? Very important to know. To also look how many layers they have put on the roof. Also, depending on, you have flat roofs or pitch roofs, depending on different things. So very important to have those specialty inspections come out. And those are examples. The electrician specialty to come out and check the wiring, right? How old is it, dated? How soon will you need to update and upgrade it? Sometimes some people have done this as investors. They normally rely on their experience and professional GCs to come out and give estimates, give them the reports, so that they could base their rehab costs and their investments and bottom line based on what the GC gives them. The GC is also known as the general contractor. So specialty inspections. So those are some examples. So when you come into a just fell out of escrow opportunity, these things are actually usually already available on file. Here's the reason why an appraisal would be on file, is because they've got so far to get the appraisal done. And then, as you heard in my snippets and my notes, that the buyer could not perform. What does that mean? That means the buyer could not get the funding, could not get the loan. And it's not necessarily, it's funny because it says the buyer couldn't perform. I would probably have to look at the lender that they were working with, because the lender gave them the pre-qualification, which is why I think on my next free webinar, we're going to get into pre-qualification, pre-approvals, and TBDs. There are three types of qualifications, and none of them really have value unless you actually have someone guaranteeing and backing that they're going to give you a loan. They're all just a piece of paper, which means nothing. So I mean, like, that's real, for real. Depending on who gave you that piece of paper, because, you know, mortgage brokers can give you a pre-qualification letter, but if they're not giving you the loan, it means nothing. So some things to consider, All right, so in my slide right here, you see I have Be Like Inspector gadgets, especially with those reports and those due diligence opportunities. All right, moving along. Sellers. Here's what you need to know when you're in an opportunity to sell your property. And agents, I say sellers and agents, what the sellers need to know and what the agents need to know. Sellers, complete the statement of information, disclose. Very important that you, when your professional works with you, a qualified licensed real estate professional should work with you in getting all those documentations up front. Very important to get that up front in a timely manner so that we're not rushing for paperwork. But more importantly, the statement of information is the document where you are sharing what debts you have, liens you have, and it's really a record of your name, your social, because what happens is title will run a report to see if there's anything that you have that you owe. And so, yes, that includes baby mama, if you owe child support, baby daddy, alimony, and you stop paying, those things come up. You know, those things those things are attached to your name. So those things can affect your bottom line and impact a transaction. Other interested parties. So for instance, when you do title transfers and you're adding someone to title, that can impact the sale, because now the title company is now questioning the person that was added to title. You took them off, put them back on, and you're doing all this back and forth to do the flim flam. Stop it. Don't do that. Agents, highly recommend you front load. This will make everybody's life easier. I know you get excited about taking the listings, which I still do get excited about taking listings. But before you put that property in the market, we, as the buyer's agent, is relying on you to do your due diligence, do the homework, and make sure that you have the right parties who are authorized to sell that property, right? Especially in the cases of divorces. You have one property that one former partner is selling, and you don't have the signature of the other. You want to make sure that all parties are in agreement. Normally that doesn't happen until the 11th hour, and that comes in the form of quitclaim deeds and grant deeds and different types of deeds to make sure that the title company's protecting themselves. More importantly, they're going to make sure they're covering their bottom line. So do the front load, do your homework. Sellers, make sure you don't wait. I know you kind of get anxious and feel like, well, why should I complete the paperwork? The buyer's only doing their home inspection at this time anyways. They may not even buy it. Well, if the intent is to sell the property, then you do your part. Let the buyer be concerned with what they're supposed to do. You be concerned with what you're supposed to do, and get that paperwork filled out. That includes even getting your grant deed notarized. I oftentimes see in the transaction that's done at the last minute, and everybody's ready for funding. Everybody's waiting now to record, but we can't record because now we're waiting for the grant deeds to be notarized and delivered. And that has to be an original format. You can't scan, fax, or email that. That actually has to be an original. All righty. Moving along. Is this resonating with anyone? Is this helping? Like I said, I just wanted to just give a goodie away, especially because I have a schedule of webinars mapped out for the third Saturday of each month. This one I've already covered in a webinar format, and I've got some other awesome content that I think you're in the market to sell, buy, or you're industry professional, come on and just learn. And again, it's creating a space and environment so that we can support the industry in doing a great job, being better. We could do better. So I want to share this case study. Actually, I'm using one of my own transactions, which I think was me learning how to walk on fire. As you can see this picture here, this is me learning how to walk on fire. One of my very tumultuous, challenging transactions. It was a 6-month escrow to be exact. And I had learned so much in this transaction. Thanks, Coach David Plummer. He says, great info. I'm happy to share. Pulling out all the stops. And, I'm fortunate I have a great supportive team that I got to, I get to bounce ideas off and kind of navigate through. And one of the things that I really attributed to actually locking this up was something that came up at the 11th hour. So let me just describe what has happened, or what happened in this transaction. I love my clients, by the way. They're very happy with their home. I was representing them as their buyer's agent, also known as the selling agent. I'm going to throw out some questions, and if you can answer them, I'll give you free book giveaways. Mail some books out. So one of the, right, what's the question? What's the name of the agent? What do you call the agent that represents the seller? Question. What's the name of the agent that represents the seller? Get that question right, I'll send you a book. Okay, so the seller, I was representing the buyer, and this property had been on the market for, so DOM, dropping a line if you remember what DOM stands for. DOM, days on market. So it was on the market for 187 days, and it was tenant occupied. And that's a whole nother conversation that we can discuss, which certainly we will. And actually, I am covering that in a webinar. So buying tenant occupied property, some things that you should know and be aware of. A lot of risk and liability involved when you are transacting real estate, which is why I work with the professionals, work with the qualified professionals, I would say. Troy says signing agent. No, close. I'll give you another shot. What is the name of, what is the title of the agent that represents the seller? Okay. I said it about like a couple times already when I first started. See if you're paying attention. I got you, Troy. I appreciate that. You're with me. So our buyer was using an FHA insured loan. And for you, you typically know that as the first time home buyer loan, right? And essentially, let's just call it and learn it by what the HUD guidelines calls it. It just means you have not owned a property in the last 3 years. Last 3 years, you have not owned a property in the last 3 years. So again, by HUD guidelines and definition, if you had lost a property, albeit deed in lieu of foreclosure, or what have you, and you have not owned a property since then in the last 3 years, which means you've not written off the mortgage interest deduction in the last 3 years, you are now an eligible first-time home buyer, and you can actually use this type of loan again. So again, I'm huge about debunking misconceptions, because I think that blocks the opportunity for people to get back in the game when life happens, because life does happen. Life happens every single day. Which, by the way, my fish had babies today, which I think, well, they didn't have it today, but I just realized my fish has baby mollies. Like, we're creating life here. That's awesome. That totally gave me life, by the way. I was totally inspired now. I was like, yes. I was like, this webinar is happening. I'm going in today. The mollies had babies. The family's growing in the fish tank. So buyers using the FHA insured loan, the property condition, needed work. And so tenant occupied, needed work. More importantly, with this property, during the appraisal, the FHA appraisal, so no, there's a general home inspection and there's an FHA appraisal inspection. The FHA appraiser will call out things that they will note that will impact the insurability of that property. Because remember, FHA is an insured loan. They are guaranteeing the loan for the lender because you are putting less than 20% down, which makes you a risk, because you're not highly vested in this. For example, $100, right? You bring in $3, I'm bringing 97. Who's more at risk? Me. So that's the position of the lender, because you're only bringing $3, they're carrying 97, they're more at risk. So with the FHA insured loan, it allows them to, they're guaranteeing the loan in the event that you default, right? Because again, you're not as vested, and you can just walk away and not really be impacted. But a lender who is carrying the bulk of the financing is definitely at risk. So that's just a little blurb in the background of just how that works. And with that risk, there's a risk premium attached to it called the mortgage insurance premium. Currently, those rates are pretty high right now. I believe the upfront mortgage insurance premium right now is 1.75. Don't quote me on it, because I know they've done some changes. And then overall for the year and the life of the loan, it's 1.55. So we can go back to that. I'll double check my notes. All right, so this property needed a roof certification. Why? Because there was evidence of there were leaks happening in the roof. And so the FHA appraiser said, hey, we want to make sure this property actually has a good 2 years left on it. And so we needed a roof certification, even though that the property was being purchased in the FHA using FHA insured loan. It could be done, it can be done, and it got done, by the way. I had an aha moment late one night actually on how to do this. And we successfully closed this with an escrow holdback. And so with pooling funds together, and actually I had already gotten a bid. We got multiple bids from contractors and roofers on what will it take to just patch the roof without having to put an entire new roof. And that was acceptable. So knowing something like that to make a transaction go through is very important. So we actually were able to successfully do that post-closing the transaction. Let me say this, I did forget to point out that everybody was suing everybody, right? So the seller was suing the tenants, right, in the form of a legal eviction, because once the 60-day notice had been up, they actually had did an aggressive takeover. They had ceased all communication with the landlord, the agent, and now they pretty much were holding property hostage in so many ways. And it was now a fight. It was a fight. It was stressful for my clients now because they were anticipating moving into that property within 60 days. That didn't happen because the current tenants did not relocate at that time. So the seller now had to proceed with doing an unlawful detainer, which is a legal eviction process. That can take anywhere from at minimum 6 months or more, depending on your local jurisdictions and the guidelines regarding landlord and tenant laws. So again, very important to work with the professionals that handle that, know how to manage and navigate you through it and support you through it. And yes, that became out of pocket to the seller. It's now costing the seller to do that. Still their seller's tenants. Although what was interesting, the seller was trying to put that on my buyers and make them responsible for it, but we weren't having none of that. No, that's not how this works. So be careful when you're negotiating contracts and you're agreeing to deliver a property vacant at close of escrow, especially if it's tenant occupied. Everybody's cooperative until it's time to go. Let me just say that. Everybody's all kumbaya until it's time to go. But here's something that you should put into perspective. For someone who's been renting for the last 10 to 15 years and have been paying below market rent rates, and now they have to relocate at a higher rate, it's going to be very stressful and difficult for them to relocate. And they may likely fight you on trying to relocate. So those things you have to keep that in mind. So we successfully closed that with an escrow holdback, which is awesome. And that was something that, along with the brokers, the attorneys, my client brought in an attorney, seller brought in an attorney, the tenants had a legal advocacy group. Everybody had representation. We're trying to negotiate this to get it done. One of the things that I focus on in a transaction is, people can go back and forth with egos and being upset and all in their emotions and feelings about things. However, one thing I like to pay attention to is what is not being said. So one key thing that I knew we still had an opportunity to close this transaction is that they still had, the seller's goal was still to sell. My buyer's goal was still to buy. So if that was still the goal, then we were going to fulfill that goal. And we successfully did that. They love their home, extremely excited and happy. They've remodeled it since. And, there was so much more, there were more layered things that made that deal quite challenging, especially because while they were in escrow for that period of time, the property value actually went up, which was interesting. We had locked it in at a great price. Why? Because I was paying attention to the DOM and the terms and conditions in which I negotiated for my client. So again, that was me learning to walk on fire, which I definitely do this. Woohoo! Woohoo! So in close and summary, we talked about escrows and knowing the difference between independent versus non-independent. By the way, let me just recap because I was processing independent escrow company and settlement. So independent escrow companies definitely are run by Department of Corporations. They have bonds to protect clients' money from fraud and embezzlement. The employees actually have to have a background check with the Department of Justice, which is very important. And I think that's key. And one of the things that I also like about working with independent companies, and I advocate for independent companies, is just the liability in general. This industry is prevalent with wire fraud that, you don't want to deposit your money into a company and then vamoosh, that money's gone. Especially when our commissions is relying on escrow to see to it that they pay out and cut those checks. Very important. Same thing for a seller. Those are things that you should be asking yourself and considering. Is this an independent company versus a non-independent company? Non-independent escrows can actually be run by a real estate broker, lending institution, or direct lender, mortgage broker. They can have their own in-house escrow company that also is operated by the rules and guidelines by the Department of Real Estate, which means they can employ any of their employees to run that escrow company. And they actually don't require background checks. So weigh out the difference. Also with the escrow, with an independent escrow company, they do require to have someone on site and actually during business hours, and that escrow officer or manager needs to at least have 5 years of escrow experience. So that, for me, makes me feel a little comfortable with knowing that. The BOM, so we talked about BOMs. What does BOM stand for? Troy says notary agent, no. So I will give you the answer. So the answer of the seller that represents, the agent that represents the seller is known as the listing agent. The listing agent. Thanks, Troy. What about this one? BOM. What does BOM stand for? BOM. So we covered about pool of opportunities with the BOMs and the just fell out of escrow. Stop parroting folks and trying to, get the REO list and the foreclosures and short sales and, the probates and the auctions. There's tons of opportunities. Here's one pool that I'm just suggesting you focus on. Why? Because for buyers, it creates a cost savings for you, gives you an opportunity to know what you're getting into before really fully vesting. Financially, that is. And sellers, be reminded, I am reminding you here and now and forever, disclose, disclose, disclose. That's huge for us, right? Disclose what you know of the property, disclose of any debts or liens that you have against you, because you can't run forever. That stuff does come up. And agents, as a professional, one professional to another, please front load when you're taking these listings. Make sure you do the due diligence and the homework. That way we don't put a property under contract that actually doesn't have enough money in the deal to close, which means because the seller's got different things impacting the bottom line, commissions might be too high, impacting the bottom line. There are other parties that have a vested interest in that property that need to sign off and have not or will not, and now that's a legal matter. So again, these are reasons why, as an agent, from an agent to agent and professional in the industry, make sure you're front loading these properties. That way we don't get tied up in escrow and wasting each other's time. All right, we're professionals. All right, so Troy, I just appreciate your participation. Make sure you DM me your contact information. Send me an email to lisa@lasuperagent.com. I am gifting you a copy. Oh, he got the answer. BOM is back on market. Absolutely. you just want a free copy of Just Fell Out of Escrow, Top 5 Reasons a Property Does Not Sell, make sure you get in touch with me so I can ship that out to you. Thank you all again for taking your Wednesday afternoon on this special broadcast of Ready, Set, Real Estate, where I have just offered you a free webinar. You never know what we're going to do on this show. I've given so much content and opportunity for you to level up, get the information, make the informed, intelligent decisions. Again, I am your host, facilitator, presenter, Lisa Puerto, California licensed professional, and thank you for joining me on this special broadcast of our Ready, Set, Real Estate webinar. I must add too, there's actually on Barnes & Noble, you can grab the ebook of Ready, Set, Real Estate for $1.88. And great stuff in there. Like I said, there's gems in there. Gems of opportunities to learn how to negotiate. Troy's like, yay. You did that. Exactly. You did that. So again, if you don't care to have the printed copy, no worries. I'm ebook friendly. The Nook book is $1.88 on Barnes & Noble. Just go ahead and type in Ready, Set, Real Estate, and it's yours. It is yours. It's in there. All right, y'all. I trust you had a great time. I know I did. And make sure you sign up to the Ready, Set, Real Estate webinar schedule. You can check that out at Ready, Set, Real Estate Webinars.eventbrite.com. The schedule is up for the entire year, third Saturday of each month. If you found value in anything that I've shared today, make sure you drop a comment, share, like, subscribe, download, leave a feedback, let somebody know what we're doing on this show. I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you next time, next week, Wednesdays at 11 on Ready, Set, Real Estate.